Go ahead.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. Hello everybody, I'm Jan Orlandi and I will present a paper named Political Manipulation of the Public Firm's Objective Function by Mark White. The public firm is an object, is a topic that was analyzed in the literature several times because it was interesting to analyze the phenomena, because in West economy, West capitalism, and also, of course, in Asian capitalism, the public firm role was relevant in the 20th century. In the last part of the last century, thanks to the wave of privatization, the relevance of the public firms decreased, of course. But in countries like former Soviet bloc countries or China, the public firm role is still relevant. So it is interesting to analyze the public firm in order to see the public firm as a way for the government to influence the economy. But what is, in our framework, a public firm? A public firm is a firm that is controlled by the state, an enterprise which the relevant decisions are taken by the state. In microeconomics language, in an economics language, we can see this point as the government that assigns an objective function that decides what the public firm want to maximize. And the question is what the public firm, what the government may want to maximize. For example, its own profit. The public firm can maximize simply, as a private firm, its own profit. This is the point. Another option is that the public firm and the government, through the public firm, want to maximize the total output of the market. For example, in order to regulate a monopoly, or for example, in order to give to the consumer a sufficient supply of public goods. Another point, as it is the point of this paper, is that the government wants to maximize the social welfare. And the social welfare has different options. The social welfare can be seen as the welfare of the consumers, but social welfare can be seen also as the welfare of the firms. We assume in this paper, and Mark White assumes in his paper, that the public firm will maximize a general social welfare function. That is a weighted sum between the consumer surplus, that is the welfare of the consumers, the own profit of the public firm by zero, and the profits of the private firms by 1. And the weights are A, B, and C. These weights, we have to do some assumptions about these weights. For example, B has to be greater than A and C, just for fiscal reason, because if the government cares too much about the consumer surplus, for example, and less for B, for its own profit, it may be risky because it may obtain losses. And another assumption we make is that A, B, and C has to be non-negative. So we observe, of course, that if A is greater than C, so if the weight for the consumer surplus is greater than the weight of the private firm profit, the government, the public firm displays a pro-consumer orientation, and of course, is vice versa. So now we start a sort of strategic interaction between the public firms that maximize the general social welfare function and the representative private firms that maximize its own profit. And Mark White chooses a Cournot duopoly, a Cournot mixed duopoly, so a framework of game theory. Why Cournot? We know that Cournot is a competition in quantities and not a competition in prices. A reason for this can be that a competition in prices, when we talk about the private firms, public firm, sorry, it may be obvious because maybe the public firm can set the price at the marginal cost level, so not too much, in order to not obtain losses, but not obtain profits. So it's more interesting to look at Cournot duopoly, and the assumption about the Cournot duopoly are always the same. we have an inverse demand function, we have a cost function, in this case for simplification, free of fixed cost, with an important assumption of, about the marginal cost. We have an assumption that says that C0, that is the marginal cost for the public firms, has to be greater than the marginal cost for the private firm. So in other words, the public firm has to be less efficient than the private firm. This is useful in order to ensure that the private firms produce something. The public firm, as we said, maximizes the JSW, and the private firms maximize its own profit by 1. So we start the interaction of the Cournot interaction, and we obtain the first order condition that, as we know, is the two reaction functions. These two reaction functions are a simple model of Cournot cross each other in a point that is our equilibrium. Simple. It's very simple. So we have Q0 star and Q1 star. This is as a function of P, A, and C, that is the weights assigned by the state of the general social welfare function. So what is interesting is to analyze the reaction function of the public firm. And we see that this reaction function is coherent with the definition of the JSW function. In fact, if the government increase A, if the government cares more about the consumer surplus, the reaction function will shift outward, and this will give us more production for the public firm and less production for the private firms. And it means maybe a lower price, because the public firm is incentivized to set a lower price. So it's an advantage for the consumer. This is coherent. Another example is if we increase P, that is the weight for the public firm of its own profit, the effects of the other two weights it decreases, because the public firm, in a certain sense, is more selfish. So now we have analyzed this interaction, and we have understand, I hope, the framework. But the core of the paper is this question: is it possible for the government to cheat? Is it possible for the government to assign a general social welfare function to the public firm that is pro-consumer, for example, even if the government itself wants to obtain a pro-business orientation? And the answer to this question, that I will try to answer through the words of Mark White, is only under certain conditions. In order to explain this point, let's suppose that we have a true general social welfare function. That is the general social welfare function that the government wants to maximize. That has as weights F, G, and H. And a claimed general social welfare function. A general social welfare function is assigned, that is known by the public, by the market, by the private firm and the public firm itself, taken as given, but it's not the true one, with weights A, B, and C. Now, we have changed the framework, because we now have a two-stage game. Because in the first stage, the government has to choose which general social welfare function assigned to the public firm. Okay, because it's different now from the true one. And in the stage 2, this Cournot interaction, as we have seen, starts. So we want to find a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium. And in order to obtain the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium, we have to proceed with a backward induction. So we start from the stage 2. In the stage 2, we have our Cournot duopoly, our Cournot interaction, and we obtain two quantities, Q0 and Q1 star, of course, as a function of A, B, and C. In the stage 1, knowing this result from the stage 2, this potential output, the government will maximize its true general social welfare function with respect to A, B, and C. The government will try to assign A, B, and C such that its general social welfare function is maximized. And the result is that normalizing B to 1, there is a parameter that is less interesting to us. Normalizing it to 1, the result is a relation between C and A function C as a function of A that gives us an important result that all the pairs of values of A and C that satisfy this relation maximize the total, the general social welfare function of the public firm. And we have this function now, this relation. Every pairs of value of C and A that satisfy this relation maximizes the general social welfare function. Good. But what we want to answer our question, of course, is it possible for the government to assign a general social welfare function that has weights C greater than A, for example, the general social welfare function that displays a pro-business orientation, even if the true one is pro-consumer, is H is lower than F. And we have to analyze different situations. In this graph, we have C of A, the function as we define it, and C equal to A. And we can argue that if C of A is above C equal to A, C is greater than A. Okay? And the interval that we are interested in is from 0 to 1, because remember, we have normalized B to 1, and in our assumption, A, and C has to be lower than B, and A, B, and C has to be greater than 0. So, in this case, when the intercept is positive and the fixed point is at a level that is lower than 0, the fixed point is the point in which C of A and C equal to A cross each other. In this point, C is always greater than A. In this case B, we have that in the interval that we care about, C can be lower than A, equal to A, and greater than A. And in this third case, C is always from 0 to 1 lower than A. So looking at these three options, the one that we are interested in, of course, for our result is the case B, because in the case B we have the government assigning C and A as different choices. So the point, as we said, the situation that is good for us is the intercept of C of A is negative, and the fixed point of C of A has to be between 0 and 1. And in this paper, it's proved that this corresponds to say that the true general social welfare function must not be too asymmetric. The government, in its true interest, in its true general social welfare function, must not prefer too much the consumer surplus than the business profit, and vice versa. So, making a summary, these are the conditions. We have explained which is the definition of the public firm. We have looked to the interaction between the public and the private firm, and in the third step, we have shown, I hope, that the pro-consumer attitude is it's not the government can show a pro-consumer attitude even if it's to the reverse, even if he cares more about businesses than consumer surplus. Okay.
So, any questions? So I'll ask. So what matters is just whether the two weights on profit and consumer surplus are above or below the diagonal, as it were. So if you have exact values of H and F,
yeah,
will you ever choose C and A exactly equal to H and F, or they will be just in the same relative size?
Okay, in this at one. Okay, in this case, I have this C of A. Okay, that is given by the set H and F.
Yeah.
H and F are set. So all the curve of the blue curve, all the points in this curve maximize the true one general social welfare function. So in this case, from 0 to 1, the government can assign a general social welfare function that is with A, C that is lower than A. C
Oh.
equal to A,
Yeah,
and
okay,
C
okay.
greater than A. So you can cheat.
Yeah, yeah,
You can cheat,
yeah.
okay.
Okay. Any more points? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.